Hello there friends and welcome. For today's Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader Guide we have my strongest build yet. As requested, a Pyromancer, Bladedancer, Executioner, so we are combining the two newest archetypes in one. With this character you'll have the strongest alpha strike possible, because you'll hit like a nuclear bomb. With just one power, you'll get to wipe instantly a whole screen worth of enemies, that's all enemies in the battle, in just one move, no matter how far away they are. Even if you don't have line of sight against them, you are blowing them up. And if anything manages to survive on unfair mode, it doesn't matter because you'll still annihilate them with tremendous amount of multi-hit single target spells. Plus this character is also a complete blast to play as early as Act 1, because even then, you can already delete the entire enemy pack by just relying on your Bladedancer abilities, as you'll just keep on attacking again and again and again, all in a single turn, without even needing to be buffed by allies or officers, while combining your powerful melee and spell strikes at will for the perfect fighter mage playstyle, which also means this is the build with the highest amount of attacks possible per turn. So without further ado, let us get into our Bladedancer, Executioner, Pyromancer build, first with character creation. This character can work as both the main character or a mercenary, and for Homeworld, Death World is by far the best option, mostly because of your Wounded Beast unique talent. That increases your agility and willpower, two of your most important stats, by +5 for each injury or +15 even for each trauma. And as I'll explain later, Bladedancers have very easy ways of getting traumas even as early as battle begins without the enemies needing to damage you. And the bonuses will just add up again and again and again. For background, Sentient Psyker, of course, you really want to be a Pyromancer because of the amazing synergy it has with the Executioner new archetype. Mostly because of the fact when combined with all of your burn abilities, especially Ignite, Firestorm, and Inflame, well, that's how you blow up all enemies instantly as early as battle begins, regardless of line of sight. But of course, I'll explain it better in the how to play section. Your triumph can be whatever, you might as well go with Glory for extra persuasion, as there are some persuasion checks in the game only the main character can make. For Darkest Hour, you might as well go for Grim Portents, because logic doesn't really matter for this character. On the other hand, Awareness and Lore Warp can be useful. And for your starter archetype, we are of course going with the newest Bladedancer. I've already explained in my Kibela build why it's so powerful, if not OP even. But to put it simply, you have a lot of attacks, including the most powerful Alpha Strike as early as possible because of how many attacks you can perform just as early as battle start. For stats, it's all about, first, willpower, to increase the power of your spells as a Psyker, followed by agility, as it increases a lot of stuff, to be fair, dodge, initiative, even your damage as a Bladedancer, and then weapon skill for more melee potential. For your first skill upgrade at the second level, go for Medicae. It has the highest synergy with both Bladedancer and Executioner, as I'll explain soon enough. And for your first Bladedancer talent at level 4, be sure to pick Facing the End. This will increase the power of your character based on how many injuries and traumas you have. +3 agility and weapon skill, 2 of your most important stats for each injury, or +10 for each trauma. And of course, as you're about to see, it will stack with our unique Death World talent. So for level 5 as a generic talent, you'll want Wounded Beast. This way, every trauma will provide your character with first 25 agility, which is amazing for the early game, then 15 willpower and +10 weapon skill, because of course Facing the End will stack with Wounded Beast. The agility increase alone is enormous, and we are soon getting a very easy way of proccing traumas on ourselves as early as battle starts. But for stat upgrades, go with agility first, as it can help you both deal more damage and survive enemy attacks, so amazing for the early game. And for your first Bladedancer power at level 6, it's time for Blood Oath, I already explained what makes it so good in my Kibble build, but to put it simply, it doesn't cost any AP, doesn't have a cooldown, has unlimited range, can be cast once per enemy, and costs wounds to use. Amazing because it's the easiest way of proccing injuries and traumas on your character early without needing enemies to attack you, because as you pay the cost in hit points, you will eventually get an injury and a trauma. Which of course will proc the benefits from facing the end and Wounded Beast. Plus of course, put you in range for a desperate measure even as early as battle begins, which means you can then activate your highly powerful Death Waltz to start the pain train. Once again, I'll explain it better in the how to play section. But yeah, this even has secondary benefits, it's not just about self-damage, in that if you kill the target, you'll get +1 AP and 1 additional attack per turn, so quite stacked. But the secondary benefits doesn't really stack. Not to mention 100% hit chance against enemies marked with this, so yeah, it's really good. After that, more Decay and more Agility. For our second Bladedancer talent, what you want now is Blood Rush. Whenever you use an ability that costs wounds, you'll gain +3 MP. Amazing of course because it stacks per each Blood Oath use. And like I said, this doesn't have a cooldown or any AP cost. After you max Decay, it's going to depend on what other skills your party members are covering. For me, I'd rather increase Lore Warp, as this character will have high willpower, and I don't have anyone else in my active party that does it. But there's other options like Demolition, you'll have high agility, but you'll have Argenta for that, or Athletics, and well, I have Abelard for that. In any case, you can always go with Awareness as well, but for me it's Lore Warp. For another generic talent, at long last you'll be picked Psyker Minoris to increase our spell power. Great because you can of course combine your multiple Bladedancer melee abilities with spells, because stuff like Death from Above and Death Waltz doesn't prevent you from using a spell. Plus of course Blood Oath restores one additional attack that can be used as a spell as well. For the first Death Waltz upgrade, the second one always, it's the most busted of them all. It will immediately provide you with +4 charges of Death from Above, which is of course amazing because it doesn't cost anything, and even increases the damage of Death from Above equal to your agility bonus as a flat source, also busted because you know you have +25 agility per trauma. After that, for more Bladedancer stuff, we want Race Against Death. This will increase your hit points equal to your dodge divided by 10. So even early on, this can already provide what, around 1/3 extra HP. Once you max agility, I recommend you increase willpower for more spell damage potential. Followed by the second power, which will be a Psyker power, Firestorm. You'll need it to get the highly OP Inflame, which is busted good with an Executioner. Plus of course, it is an area of effect attack, which is great for hitting multiple enemies, and making them burn, which also has synergy with Executioner. After that, pick Death Warden, which will let your Medicae skill be increased based on weapon skill instead of intelligence. And of course, you'll always have much higher weapon skill. Even better later because it has synergy with Executioner, but it also even increases your critical damage, which is very good once again for Executioner. Then more willpower, followed by Lore Warp for me. And as a generic talent, it's time to pick Sparks of the Greater Flame. This will have busted good synergy with Executioner because it lets your damage over time effects get critical hits. The chance starts kinda low, but will soon enough become rather high, and is key to our combo that destroys enemies instantly at the start of battle. Once you max Lore Warp, you might as well pick Awareness, followed by more weapon skill. And then, as much as I would love to get another Bladedancer talent, because there's a lot of good stuff here, you kinda have to pick Psyker Majoris now to qualify you for the Inflame power we'll be picking with Executioner. Followed by the third upgrade to Death Waltz. I actually wish I had picked this from my Kibble build as well. Anyways, this will make all of your attacks, including ones made as part of Death Waltz, and you have so many as a Bladedancer, especially Death from Above. Reduce the enemy's weapon skill, which means higher critical chance against them with melee attacks, and most importantly, decrease their armor. The less armor they have, the better for all of your attacks, including Psyker powers. As for our second archetype, you'll of course want the new Executioner. I must apologize because in my previous DLC review guide, I kinda sold it short. The reality is Executioner is quite powerful if not busted, especially when combined with Pyromancer. It's an archetype that's all about inflicting damage over time effects on the enemy. There's actually 4 of them: Bleed, Poison, Burn, and Warp Burn, which comes from your Pyro spells. Now, even if by default enemies only suffer damage over time effects at the start of their turn, you'll have multiple abilities as an Executioner to immediately blow the enemies up, thus applying lots of your damage over time effects at once, at the very start of battle. But of course, as always, I'll explain it better in the how to play section. Now, for your first Executioner power, you absolutely want a Psyker power instead, Inflame. This is what will let you, well, essentially blow up the entire enemy army in just one turn, instantly. But it will only get better and better, especially at level 27, which is when you get to make all enemies instantly suffer from Burn, also Bleeding and Toxin. But anyways, by default, Inflame lets you first increase the burning damage enemies will suffer, and this will scale based on your willpower, which is great because we are a Psyker. Second, the most important part is that it makes all creatures in combat that are burning immediately suffer burn damage. Since you do have a way to make everyone burn instantly, well, that's how you blow them up. But even before that, you still have your Pyro spell to make enemies burn, also let's say Cassia's Lidless Stare power, when aided by the Demon Tool Talisman, so making enemies burn is pretty easy. Now, for your first Executioner True Talent, go for Acute Pain. This is the best one by far because it increases your damage over time power by 100%, so double. Level 19 means your Executioner Heroic Action Carnival of Misery. Its effects are kinda the same as Acute Pain and it even stacks. For level 21, this time I'd rather increase our willpower first because Inflame is that good with Executioner. And once again, it's directly tied to willpower. So save agility and weapon skill for later. Then more willpower, followed by Does It Hurt? Amazing because it lets your damage over time effects critical. Made even better because it actually combines and stacks with the Sparks of the Greater Flame talent we just picked as a Pyromancer. And the higher the critical chance of your dots, the better because that's how you explode enemies with Inflame even on Unfair, where they have almost twice the amount of HP. Then for another power, we at long last want an Executioner one. Reckless Abandon. This is the best for increasing damage over time potential. First, you'll pay a few of your HP and even replace it with temporary wounds instead. Then increase all of your melee and damage over time damage by an additional amount based on 30% of your maximum HP, which is very easy to increase, as you're about to see. Here's the thing, it's actually very hard to increase damage over time effect outside of Executioner bonuses, like Acute Pain, because most bonuses from, let's say, other abilities and classes and gear don't seem to apply. Critical bonuses and also bonuses from Executioner, however, do. And the higher your dot effect, the easier it is to explode enemies through Inflame. After that, you want another Bladedancer talent, this time Anatomy Expert. This will scale your HP based on your Medicae skill instead of toughness, and of course your Medicae will always be much higher, because it's first based on weapon skill from Bladedancer, and well, we have been increasing it to level up. Plus of course, the higher your HP, the more bonuses through Reckless Abandon, followed by Agility once you max willpower, but you can even go with weapon skill since it does increase your Medicae as well. Just pick what you prefer. For your generic talent at level 24, you can go with Psyker Terminus, but at this point I would rather delay it for later, since your Psi rating isn't that important anymore. You already have Inflame, which is based on your willpower, and it will only get better and better. My preferred pick is Brutal Hunter, another Death World exclusive talent. This will increase your critical hit chance by 50% against enemies that are bleeding or below 50% of their HP. Most importantly against bleeding enemies, because soon enough, you'll have a way of making all enemies instantly bleed. Then as another Executioner talent, it is time for Master of Torture, which will increase your damage by 5% more for each time of dot the enemy is under at the moment, and you have 4 total. After that, more agility or weapon skill. Then at long last, at level 27, we can pick the highly OP upgrade for your Carnival of Misery heroic action. And of course you want the third one. All enemies in combat, it doesn't matter if they're far away or even beyond your line of sight, will immediately suffer from the 3 most important damage over time effects, Bleeding, Burning and Toxin. Amazing of course, because by just activating this and combining it with the Pyro Inflame power, well, that's how you unleash a nuclear bomb on all enemies, instantly at the very beginning of battle, and it doesn't even cost you an attack. After that, we want all-encompassing agony. If the enemy is suffering from all the 3 main dot effects, burning, bleed and poison, they'll take 30% more damage. Great of course, because we now have a way of affecting them with all of the effects at once. And this doesn't even have any resistance. It always works. But of course, some enemies like true machines, such as turrets, will be immune to poison and bleed. Not burn and warp burn, however. Then more weapon skill or agility, followed by, well, depends on what you picked before. For me, lore warp, since we maxed Medicae out already. For another power, well, you have 2 options here. My preferred pick is Biomancy, because it qualifies you for a very powerful Biomancer talent. Deterioration. Whenever you debuff the enemy with an effect that increases the damage they take, it will be increased by 50% more. This has absolutely busted synergy with the Acute Pain talent we picked way earlier, which of course increases the damage enemies take by 100%. With Deterioration, it will become 150%, quite the hefty increase. Great once again to blow all enemies up with your Inflame. And you get to pick it at the same level as you pick Biomancer. On the other hand, if you want some more fighter mage powers, you can go for Sanctic powers instead. Especially because of the Sanctified Slayer feature, which increases your critical hit chance based on your resolve, something very easy to buff at this point in the game. And the higher your critical hit chance, the better, because once again, it's how you blow enemies up with Inflame instantly. I'll just be going with Biomancy and Deterioration first, especially because it doesn't require criticals at all. It always works. After that, well, you already have the best Executioner talents for higher damage, but you can go with Fragile Playthings, which will debuff the enemy's armor, only once though. It's just that Cassia and Pascal, for my builds anyways, have much better ways of doing that. Besides, you can also go for Wrecking Weakness, which increases your dot power against enemies that have reduced armor. Once again, easy to proc through Cassia and Pascal. I'd rather Wrecking Weakness first. Followed by more weapon skill, and more lore warp. For the last Executioner talent, I would much rather get another generic talent now, because we already have the best ones, as I mentioned before. First with Psyker Terminus at long last, for higher Psi rating. This way we can pick more weapon skill at the next level, and the last Psi rating increase, Psyker Extremis. So now you're capped out on Psi rating. Even if it doesn't increase in flame power, it does increase the warp burn effect from your pyro powers, like Ignite and Firestorm. For the last Carnival of Misery upgrade, be sure to go for the first one, mostly because it will let your burning effects bypass the enemy's armor and deflection, which is huge. Now let us cover exemplar progression for our Pyromancer Bladedancer Executioner. For the first talent, this will be a bit different than the norm. Usually I go with Extermination for most damage dealers, but this time what you want is Critical Velocity. It increases your critical hit chance and damage by 5% of your dodge, which of course, first will be high because you have high agility, and second, is very easy to increase to enormous amounts like 200% plus through buffs at this point. And the higher your critical chance and damage, the better for blowing enemies up with your Executioner Pyromancer combo. The issue with Extermination for this build is that it's only +1 for every attack you make, and usually you'll just blow enemies up with one single attack, that is Inflame, so it's not as good. But can still work with some Bladedancer stuff, I just find it kinda unnecessary at this point. Critical Velocity though is great. After that, we can finally pick more Bladedancer talents. I would first go with Guillotine, and the reason is simple: this empowers your death from above, to deal double damage against enemies that have less than 50% wounds. If you are on unfair, anything that survives your inflame at this point, usually the boss will be left so crippled that you'll easily one-shot them after that through guillotine. But it's not that necessary, you can also skip it and instead go with dance partners. Still, I think it's a fun ability, especially because how spammable Death from Above is. After that, a return to Medicae increases our most important skill. Once again, you don't really need any more Executioner talents, so I'd rather pick more generic Psyker stuff. Something fun now is Blade of Light, which increases the power of your Force Blades, and at this point you can have the best one already, even as early as the second chapter. It's based on Psi rating for more damage and more armor penetration, and of course, by this point in the game you already have maxed out Psi rating, followed by more willpower for higher inflame damage, and as a generic talent, you might as well pick It Will Not Die Now. This character can have very high HP because it's based on Medicae, increased by dodge, and of course, you'll be even higher now through It Will Not Die, which does translate into more damage as well from our Executioner Reckless Abandon ability. For the power at level 39, you honestly already have the best ones. There's something to be said about Incinerate, although I don't think it's that necessary because Inflame is really good, but since you have a way of making our enemies burn, it can do decent enough damage. I just feel like it's more of a win more tier ability than something you really need. Besides that, you have Enfeeble, to also increase the damage enemies take, or my preferred pick, which is Sanctic Powers at Last, as you have some nice Fighter Mage talents from this. Followed by more Medicae, and, as another Exemplar talent, Combat Meditation. This will increase your willpower by plus 15, which is noticeable, and once again, Inflame damage is tied to willpower. It won't work if you're using ranged weapons, and you won't, because you have, dual swords plus a staff. And speaking about the Sanctic talents, go for Sanctified Slayer for uber critical range increases. It's vastly higher than this in battle, because you'll be buffed, of course, talking about 30, 40, even 100% plus, if you know your buffs. Then more willpower, followed by another Bladedancer talent. Dance partners to increase your weapon skill, which of course means more criticals and more HP, based on your agility bonus. The other power can be whatever you want. I would just go for Enfeeble now, to increase the damage enemies take. After all, it also works with the Deterioration Biomancer talent we picked before. Then more weapon skill or agility, followed by Psalms of Heroes for a nice boost to Psi rating. And characteristic training, willpower. Once you max Medicae, for me it's Lore Warp or Awareness. Then go for Cataclysm. All of your damage will be increased by 3% for every new enemy damage in combat. Unlike Extermination, this is great for our build because, well, our Inflame will instantly hit all enemies, thus increasing this by the max. For level 46, you might as well go with Bloody Requiem to increase your resolve even further, so that if for some reason you don't have an officer to buff your resolve, well, you'll still have a way of increasing the power of your Sanctified Slayer talent. Then more Lore Warp, followed by Unforgiving, which increases your damage whenever you lose wounds, and of course you have many abilities that self-inflict damage. Then more Awareness, followed by the Eternal Glory talent. It's minor bonuses, but we have the space for it now. After that, more agility or weapon skill. The same for the other level. And awareness. Then my preferred pick is, because we have such high HP, Tough as Steel, which increases your HP even further, especially because of how easy it is to buff toughness. And once again, the higher your HP, the bigger the bonus from Reckless Abandon. Then you might as well pick Hymns of Hatred. When you combine everything we have, plus this, you'll definitely have around 100% critical chance, if not even bigger than that. Well, at this point you kinda have the best talents overall, so you might as well finally go for Fragile Playthings as Executioner. Then more Awareness, and Promises of Blood, which is a minor benefit at this point, but we have the space for it. Then Characteristic Training, either agility or weapon skill depending on what you prefer to increase. The last power can be whatever. Might as well go with Warp Speed to buff allies. then more weapon skill, and for the last talent, it can really be whatever you want. I'll just go for Perfection Under Fire for the +5 to all stats. The same for the last first and second archetype talent. Might as well pick Blade in his hand for some minor extra damage on melee attacks. And that's it. Now let us cover how to play as our Pyromancer, Bladedancer, Executioner first at Act 1, so the early game. My character is only level 10 here, but you'll already be able to perform this quite OP combo as early as level 6. Level 9 is when you reach your peak power, however, because of the first upgrade to your heroic action. Anyways, my character already has dual traumas, as this is the second battle in Record Minoris. We got traumas before. But we want even more traumas. Unlike other characters, we actually thrive under them because of the fact our Facing the End Bladedancer talent stacks with Wounded Beast from our Homeworld. So even if we have Crippled Leg for minus agility and less movement points, followed by Broken Ribs for less action points, strength and toughness, we still have 90 agility, even so early in the game, with a +50 coming from these talents, also +30 to our willpower, and +20 to weapon skill. And this is all without being buffed by one of our officer allies. So of course the stats could be even higher. Anyways, as early as battle start and your character's turn comes, which is pretty easy since you have very high agility for high initiative, but even then you can also perform all of this under an extra turn from an officer ally. Anyways, this is actually our first true turn. Move close to the enemies, ideally enemies that are grouped together. And first, we want to start with our Blood Oath, the primary key piece of our combo. This will cause hit points to activate, ideally on the enemies that you know will die from your first attacks, like the Minutemen Rebels here with low HP. Start activating Blood Oath. We already gained a lot of movement points because of our Blood Rush talent, despite the fact we have a debuff from Trauma, but just mark them all. This is important because once you hit a low enough threshold in HP, guess what? We'll gain another trauma. This time we have head trauma. It reduces willpower, kinda sad, but we still have a lot of bonuses from Wounded Beast. And even more agility and weapon skill. So just early at Act 1 on Unfair, you already have 100+ agility without being buffed by any party member. You actually want even more, because you'll want to put your momentum at a low enough threshold to activate your Death Vault's Desperate Measure, something only Bladedancers can do because of Blood Oath, of course. Something possible to do so long as your momentum is under 100 or equal to it. So let's go for Death Vaults because it is extremely powerful. Ideally, because of the way Death Vaults works, it basically chains death from above multiple times. You can hit multiple enemies with it so long as they are touching the same cell. Also, if there are any nearby targets, as you're about to see, you can even jump to them and also attack them during it. So let's just move a bit ahead here and activate Death Vaults on this enemy here because he is at the center of the pack. Great for hitting all the other nearby ones. And well, they'll mostly die, so let's just see how it goes. They're already all dead here. You of course regain HP from Blood Oath, and just keep on going. Look at how high the damage is even early. So you actually killed all of these enemies because of Death Vaults. Most of your damage coming from the fact your agility is very high, and of course we upgraded our Death Vaults so that death from above will deal even higher damage, based on agility of course. Because our Death Vaults will increase the death from above charges, we also have a lot of extra uses, 6. So you can actually keep the pain train going, but first it helps you have higher movement. It's time for even more Blood Oath of course. This has unlimited range so long as the enemy is under your line of sight. So let's hit this one here, followed by the one here. And that's enough for us to move, because you want to get in range for the other closest pack of multiple enemies.
How fascinating.
We still need to move a bit more for line of sight, so Blood Oath on this other enemy here. And there we go, we have line of sight now. And I almost forgot, but because you used Death Walls as a desperate measure, you actually suffer another trauma, which for us is a benefit rather than a downside. So now our character has 135 agility even so early without any buffs. Plus of course higher willpower and weapon skill. The debuff to other stats do not matter at all, even the fact you have -1 resolve. Plus amazing dodge because of how high your agility is. Anyways, now that we are in range, we want to hit the closest pack of multiple enemies. Ideally, you also want to cast Blood Oath on them all, always focusing on the weaker targets first because you are guaranteed killing them. But first, let's kill this enemy here with Death from Above. He's getting one shot anyways. There we go. Just for more hit points so we can use Blood Oath again on another enemy. This one. As you get more movement. Now, something fun you can do is switch to your Psyker staff. I just have the normal Chain Lightning staff now. But soon enough, you can get the Pyro staff, which actually comes from a chest right here. After this battle, of course. Anyways, the Chain Lightning staff is good enough, because of course it can hit multiple enemies. And will one-shot most of them, by virtue of such high willpower from our trauma buffs. Still, because of the fact it does block movement on the same turn, move closer as you get in range of the other enemies you wanna kill afterwards. No sense in wasting movement. Now let's go for a Chain Lightning on the poor fools here.
A blood-soaked tribute.
And we almost killed all of them. But here's the best part, you'll still have another use of Chain Lightning because Blood Oath restores 1 AP. And we actually only use an ability that costs an AP now. Plus it does let you attack one more time. So Chain Lightning on the remaining enemies here. Then switch back to your swords. And well, we might as well kill this one with Death from Above. So Blood Oath on another enemy, we got to move. Now he's in range of Death from Above. This doesn't prevent movement. And now we only have the other enemies to handle. But since we've been killing a lot of enemies, including for our Psyker staff, we still have loads of Death from Above uses. And we only need to move one more time as you get in range and keep our Death from Above pain train going. So Blood Oath on the last enemy here. And there we go, this should be enough. Now it's just time to flip and flop using Death from Above and dancing as a true Bladedancer should be. Then this one here. And there's only 2 poor fools remaining. Remember, Death from Above can hit the same enemies if they share the same cell. That is, they're touching the same cell. And there we go. In just one turn, not even provided by an officer, without being buffed by any other party member, and all on unfair mode of course, our Pyro Bladedancer managed to defeat all the enemies without ever getting hit. All while also being under 4 different traumas, which for us is a bonus. It definitely doesn't get any more powerful any earlier than this. So once again, it's a blast to play from even the early game. Plus, this isn't even our final form yet, because there's still a lot of extra levels, especially all the fun executioner stuff. So let's get into that now, for Act 2 plus gameplay. Now, these enemies here have already been debuffed by Cassia, which is why they have less armor. The same for the other enemies, who were brought close together through her movement abilities. And she has also buffed our Executioner through Infusing, plus our Officer did Voice of Command, Air of Authority. I've already covered it in my builds for them. The most important part is if you want to get started killing all the enemies as early as possible, because of the fact initiative will be kind of random, even when you have such high amounts of agility, for example, some enemies are still gonna act before our Pyro Executioner. Although the higher your agility, the higher the chances that that won't happen, or at least that most enemies will act after you. Anyways, having extra turns can help with that. And there's multiple ways of doing it. For example, My Pascal build has Missionary Oath, Cassia has Bring It Down, they're both story party members, and they will always act first before all enemies because we have Grand Strategist on my builds for them. I don't recommend you go for Finest Hour, however, rather use Bring It Down. Because if you use Finest Hour, chances are you won't be able to activate a heroic action with your Pyro Executioner, and you do want it, as a desperate measure anyways. So something you can do is activate Bring It Down on him, just for the extra turn.
Rejoice in service.
And now we can activate Carnival of Misery before all enemies get to act, which of course is the starter piece of our combo. But something you can do first, since you still get to attack with Inflame afterwards, even attack with a normal spell again, or your Bladedancer abilities, is cast Ignite on the toughest enemy. Because that means Warp Burn on them, which of course means even more damage when you apply Ignite. It's not necessary, however, and you can do it afterwards. Anyways, activate Carnival of Misery. What if you don't have it as a heroic action? Well, don't forget you can actually make your momentum drop enough through Blood Oath. So just for showcasing purposes, let's do that. Blood Oath
Guides me.
on some targets here, especially the weaker ones. It's the same logic as before on the how to play section during Act 1.
Ruin beckons.
Right, you already start losing momentum by virtue of injuries and traumas. There we go. We now have 1 trauma, and can activate Carnival of Misery as a desperate measure. Don't forget you still have access to Death Walls as well, but Carnival of Misery is way better at this point, because once we activate it, there we go. The game even lags a bit, because all enemies will be left burning. The effects won't be as high, but we do have a lot of extra modifiers to increase their potential. Now be sure to do this under a staff, because you want as high willpower as possible, so that your Inflame will deal the highest amount of damage, because it is based on that. Don't forget you can keep on activating Blood Oath if you want to get more movement for your follow-up action. But anyways, before activating Inflame, which is our nuclear explosion, don't forget to activate Reckless Abandon to buff your damage over time damage. This is very important, because you want as high damage on this Alpha Burst Strike as possible. Reckless Abandon does require you to have enough hit points to pay for the cost, so if you want to use Blood Oath on many enemies first,
Guides me.
well, do it in a way that you are still left with enough hit points before you activate Reckless Abandon. Don't forget this.
I need no guidance.
Now it's pretty simple. All enemies are burning and they are viable targets for Inflame. Plus, of course, they're also suffering from bleeding, toxin, and don't forget you can stack Warp Burn with normal burning by using one of your Pyro abilities on the enemy before. Hell, you could even activate, let's say, Ignite for loads of damage, but it's not needed. What we want now is Inflame. So let's watch the magic happen.
Steady hold as I
And there we go.
in my devil.
Everything has been killed, instantly. Now what if enemies still survive? Because they can, the toughest ones anyways, especially if you're on unfair mode. Because the reality is, even if anything survives your Inflame, Alpha Strike, Nuclear Explosion, you'll still have loads of other actions to destroy the enemy in the same turn. For example, in this battle here, I didn't buff my character high enough that you could one-shot all enemies. But it's the same logic as before. Go back to your staff, then activate Reckless Abandon,
One step closer.
and Inflame. It's gonna deal higher damage here because we are Act 4 with higher willpower bonuses, of course, especially from Cassia buffs. And we only have a single trauma because this battle happens right after you leave the ship. Anyways, just Inflame, and the Chaos Marines most likely will survive, especially this one here who is not burning. There we go.
Them no mercy.
The Chaos Marines are basically the only ones left. But here's the thing, they are almost dead on Unfair. And whatever enemy survives Inflame will be left with such a tremendous amount of burn. Right, it even overflows to the bottom line here because of how high it is, 3 digits. That you could potentially just pass your turn and the enemies would die. You don't need that, however, because first, By killing all these enemies to Inflame, you'll have generated a tremendous amount of extra stacks to your Death from Above Bladedancer ability, because remember, we have yet to use any Bladedancer stuff outside of Blood Oath. And attacks like Blade Dance and Death from Above do not count against the attack limit, so you can still do normal attacks or normal spells and combo with them. The best way, however, to deal with whatever is left alive, especially bosses with very high HP on Unfair, is still keeping your staff on for higher willpower, then activating the Where It Hurts feature from Executioner, which will make your dot effects on the enemy explode multiple times for loads of damage. This only works once, however, that is for the next attack. Then go for Ignite on whatever's left. Let's pick this poor Chaos Marine here, who has 396 burning. And look at all the stacks of damage we inflicted because of Where It Hurts. So all of this was dealt to the Chaos Marine. Which means, of course, even if you had a boss here, they would most likely have died. But don't forget, you still have more attacks, like let's say the Pyro Staff here, because it's fun. Also exploded, because of how many instances of damage you have. Well, and don't forget, for the Pyro Staffs, the best ones anyways, they increase in power level, which means more damage through your Inferno Burst. The more enemies are burning, so you can just go for Ignite, then Pyro Staff before using Inflame, because everything will be burning, of course. Anyways, there's still one poor enemy left here, doesn't matter. Now it's time for Bladedancer stuff, and you have what? 16 charges of Death from Above, plus Blade Dance remaining, and even one extra attack. But you could just flip-flop around the map, dancing, and there we go, one shot. So yes, this character has the highest amount of attacks possible in the game. I can't see anything better than this. Now let's discover gear for our Pyromancer, Bladedancer, Executioner, starting with Act 1 options. To be fair, this character doesn't really need a lot of gear, early on at least. Because for a lot of slots like gloves, accessories, I'd rather leave them for other characters, because you're so busted, especially because of your, trauma to power mechanic, that you just don't need it outside of armor, swords, and a staff. So for swords, ideally dual wielding for more attacks during Blade Dance. The first sword can be whatever, so long as it, decreases enemy's weapon skill when hit. For the second sword, early on I like the Wrath of Saint Drusus, because it increases the damage enemies hit by it take by 50%. After all, you will attack for free with it under Blade Dance. Now there is a very cheesy, overpowered option that you can also use, which is the Noble Sword. The problem is I'm pretty sure this weapon is very much bugged at the moment, but what it does is, well, what it's meant to do anyways, is once you hit a target with it, it will get a disturbed effect. After that, for further hits if the enemy is already disturbed, they'll take lots of extra damage, flat damage that is, based on your willpower, which of course is one of our best stats. The problem is, at the moment, this extra damage bonus always seems to be in effect. You don't even need to hit the enemy first and disturb them for that. So of course it's quite cheesy, and I imagine they will fix that eventually. Even when fixed, however, it can still be good, because just like Wrath of Saint Drusus, you are hitting the enemies multiple times with this through your Blade Dance from Bladedancer. Anyways, I have not used the sword in any of this guy's footage because of the bug abuse, but even without it you still have super high damage regardless. Then for our second weapon we want a Psyker Staff, ideally the Psychic Staff, early, for the Chain Lightning ability, but very soon at Rykard Minoris you can also pick the Pyro Staff instead. And for armor, just a Psychic Body Glove, or the Sin Skin, which can increase your dodge by an extra, 2%, it's not that much. As far as talismans, just the Denial of Nightmares, so you aren't hit by the horrors of the Warp effect, which reduces, well, a lot of your important stats besides agility. And for cloaks, you can just go with the Font Valencia's cloak if it's the main character because no one else in your party can equip this. Now let's cover Act 2 options. The big upgrades here come first in weapons because you can already get the best force weapon in the game, the Ancient Force Sword. That has decent base damage and even more based on your psi rating. You can dual wield it with, for example, the normal force sword that Heinrich starts the game with. Or just keep to the OP bugged noble sword I mentioned before. While these swords aren't really necessary, I just think they're fun on a build that's pretty much the ultimate fighter mage. Besides that, upgrade your normal Pyro staff into the Staff of Endless Flame. This staff even increases in power the more enemies that are burning, for +1 for every 2 burning enemies. Besides that, for helmet we do have a big upgrade as usual for Psychers, the classic Eyes of Joyous, which increases your psi rating by +1 for every rank of dogmatic you have. Honestly, it is not necessary, however. For example, this here is a mercenary. Even a +1 psi rating is good enough. But of course, the higher your dogmatic rank, the better for this helmet. The thing is, Inflame by itself, which is your big burst ability as a nuclear strike, doesn't care about psi rating, only willpower. However, it does help to have the main character at least with 2 ranks in dogmatic for the Absolution feature, which increases fire damage suffered by enemies by +2, including the burn you inflict on them. And honestly, getting 2 ranks is pretty easy even if you don't plan on going all out with a dogmatic character. You can still max out, let's say, Iconoclast or Heretical. Besides that, for armor we have the Death World Origin and Enforcer Light Carapace for +10 agility and decent armor scores. Meanwhile, for cloaks, the pack of reagents is very good, because it increases your burning, also bleeding and toxin effects by +2. Trust me, this does add up, because of all the percentage modifiers you'll have added on top of it. Plus Inflame. For gloves, my preferred pick is the Stabilizer Bracers. The bonus to ballistic skill doesn't matter, but the bonus to critical damage will work with your Inflame, and also where it hurts abilities from, well, Executioner. For boots, just like my Pyro Blaster God build, the Caligay of St. Keith. To restore your hit points, great when using desperate measures, as you have that on demand through Blood Oath, but most importantly for the huge extra bonuses to AP during the turn you activate it. Besides that, just the Diagnostor accessory for more Medicae, which increases hit points for our build, also critical damage. The other accessory can be whatever, I just have the Book of War Prayers here. Now for the Talisman, the Invigorating Resolve as usual, because well, when you are instantly one-shotting all if not almost all enemies, you will generate a tremendous amount of momentum, which means more hit points for all party members. Now let us cover Act 3 plus gear options. For talismans we now have the Anatomist's Amulet, which works kinda like Pack of Reagents, so +2 to the power of your bleeding, burning and toxic effects. If you want more psi rating, you can instead go for the Star Mist Scarf for +2 to psi rating. Also, even extra dodge, which does increase your hit points when not wearing any armor, and armor isn't really needed for this character. For accessories, I have the Warp Surge Brooch here, but it's also not needed. I mean, it can provide with a lot of extra additional attacks in your first turn in combat, equal to your psi rating, which will be high at this point. It's just that I find it kinda overkill for this build because of how many attacks you have even without it, as a Bladedancer Executioner Pyro combo, but hey, the more the better. Then the Hand of Offense, which will highly increase your melee attack damage, great for your Bladedancer abilities, based on your psi rating. For gloves, my preferred upgrade is the Executioner Gauntlets, which increases the critical damage of your Where It Hurts power from Executioner by a pretty high amount depending on Medicae. But as always, you can just keep to the previous gloves that increase critical damage. For cloaks, unless you want to keep to the Pack of Reagents, which is still a great option, the Bladedancer's Mantle, of course, will be absolutely busted because it increases your Death from Above damage equal to 3 times your resolve. So if we had this equipped, it would actually be plus 160 extra flat damage, which is insane. And this build has lots of death from above uses as early as battle starts. Just go with what you prefer. Honestly, for armor, I just have the duelist uniform here, only for fashion because I think it fits the eyes of to use, but it can be anything you want. Besides that, just a new upgrade for your staff. Now you want the best Pyro one, the Solar Staff, for the maximum benefits. But you can also go for one of Kibala's unique swords that you get from her quest at Act 4. I actually have the wrong one equipped here, because you want the one that deals more damage against enemies with less than 50% wounds, so that whatever is left alive after your Inflame, Nuclear Strike, will be dead from your Bladedancer attacks. It's not necessary, however, you can just skip to the second Force Sword, as you'll have maxed out Psi rating at this point. And well, alright friends, so this was it for our Pyromancer Bladedancer Executioner build. If you found this guide useful, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.